Hello, everyone. This is Charlene Heidinger with Texas Pace Authority. Mark Patterson from USDA. We'll give everybody a few minutes to join us. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. Welcome, everyone. My name is Charlene Heidinger. I am president of the Texas Pace Authority. We are a nonprofit administrator of 91 PACE programs in Texas. We're delighted that you could join us today and very excited to learn about the investment that USDA is making in Texas. And with us today to tell us about highlighting one of the many programs that USDA offers is Mark Patterson from the Rural Development Office of Texas within USDA. Welcome, Mark.
Welcome, thanks for having me.
So Mark got his start as an underwriter for Native American Bank. Advancing to the position of commercial loan officer, he worked with tribes and Native American business owners on various tribal and commercial projects. This gave a broad exposure to the loan guarantee programs of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, USDA, HUD, and SBA. Mark gained additional experience as a tribal consultant in business development with a focus on hospitality, energy, and community development. Mark's federal career started in 2020 as a specialist with the Paycheck Protection Program at SBA. We're very grateful for that. So we also in March of 2023, he transitioned to the USDA Rural Development as a business program specialist, where he evaluates various business and industry loan guarantee applications and Rural Energy for America program, REAP, loan guarantees and grant applications. So Mark brings an expertise today that we welcome in Texas, and we are excited Mark, to share this expertise with so many businesses across Texas in communities that really create the beautiful society that we have in here in Texas. So I am going to stop sharing this screen and enable you to share your screen, and we appreciate your sharing your expertise with us today.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. And wouldn't you know it, my slides are not where I left them. Just one moment.
No problem.
Okay, to add to that, I would just say that I am currently based in Fort Worth, and I'm currently working for rural development in projects across Texas. Today, I wanted to focus on the Rural Energy for America program, as I think it dovetails nicely with the PACE program. It is something that we're really moving on. I'm also going to talk about kind of one of our flagship programs, the Business and Industry program, which is for businesses out in the rural parts of Texas that maybe are ancillary to some of the agricultural programs, or maybe they're in some of the commercial businesses lines as well too. What we do is actually very broad, and I think you'll see that today. On this particular slide, as it says, the REAP program is $2 billion. So it's significant. 1.7 of it is for REAP, 304 million is for underutilized technologies. For the most part, what we're seeing right now, quite honestly, is solar. Some other things, but we're seeing a lot of solar as well too. So I'll speak to the other things that this can cover. We would like it to be as broad as it possibly could. We would like to get as many applications as we possibly could as well too. There are three types of assistance available here. One is just a grant that comes to an eligible business or cooperative or for-profit in the pursuit of putting up renewable energy or supporting energy efficiency, if you will. There's also loan guarantees in two places. One of the places is within REAP. One of the other places, in case what you're looking at doesn't exactly fit into REAP, again, we have the business and industry program as well too. For the most part, those two programs dovetail each other, and you would actually go through your commercial lender to apply for those particular programs. One question, of course, that we get asked is, can I simultaneously apply for a grant and apply for a loan guarantee for my project? The answer to that question is yes. Next question that we get, if I get a grant from the USDA, does that count as equity toward my project? Absolutely, it does. There are some limits as to how much you can, of course, apply for. But if you get a grant, that counts toward the equity requirement as well, too. The project types that we were looking at, renewable energy systems, talk about more about that in a minute. Energy efficiency improvement systems. I think I'll just go ahead and say this up front. That doesn't include windows. It can include a lot of other things, but it doesn't include windows. Also, energy efficient equipment and systems. If you're a producer, if you are a producer, that's on the loan guarantee side only. But at that point in time, you don't have to be rural, if you will. You can be in downtown Dallas or downtown Fort Worth, even better. That's where I'm at. You could be basically located anywhere if you're a processor, if you will, and you are looking at energy efficiency. We'll talk for a minute about grant funding here. Before I jump into this, one of the themes that I wanted to talk about, sort of one of the things that jumped out at me when I look at these things, is there's a set aside in the grant funding for grants of less than $20,000. So in other words, we're trying to give the little guy some help. So, bear that in mind as we go through this, and you'll see that as a recurring theme as well too. The grant funding, renewable energy systems, we'll get to that in a minute. Energy efficiency improvements, something we'll get to as well too. There's also technical assistance. Some of this stuff does require energy audits. You've got to prove out the energy efficiency improvements in order to be eligible. There's technical assistance available for that as well too. There's renewable energy development assistance as well too. I'm going to stick more toward the grant side than the technical assistance side, but in some of the handouts that we have shared, there's some information on that. And of course, at the end of this, I'm going to direct you, give you our contact information for the REAP director here in Texas as well too. In all, what we're looking at here, to give you a size of the program, is a little bit over $1 billion. Part of that is grants. Part of that is loan guarantees. Long story short, there's a very significant amount of money here that can be applied for. In terms of the grants, there's 6 quarterly competitions. What we do is we have a cutoff date. The next one will be September 30th. When we get your grant or application in, we score it out. And once we get everything past September 30th, we divide them out according to what the score was, if we have to do that. Again, goes through September 30th of 2024, looking to get that much money out between now and September 30th of 2024, and a little bit after, actually. That's the last close, if you will, over this particular time period. Who is eligible? Number one, rural small businesses. we'll start talking there. A small business has to meet the SBA size standard. When I worked the Paycheck Protection Program at the SBA, I spent a lot of time looking at the size standards. Basically, it can go by two things. It can go by the number of employees that you have or the amount of revenue that your business generates. Now, on top of that, depending on what your industry is, that can affect those two standards. So there's a lot of ways to fit into this. In other words, sometimes you can just say, oh, I've got less than 50 employees, that's it. Or you might say, oh, I've got more than 50 employees or more than 100 employees or more than 200 employees, but I'm in this industry and I produce this much revenue, therefore I'm small. And sometimes you see some very large businesses in terms of employee size or in terms of revenue size qualify for the SBA size requirement, if you will. It's not terribly restrictive, to be honest with you. Does have to be a private for-profit entity, or, of course, being rural, a cooperative, an electric utility, or a tribal corporation. I have a background in working in Native America. I know we don't have a lot of tribal corporations here, so I won't address that. I have been asked to address, well, I'm a nonprofit. Is there something for me? In the other programs that we have, there might be something for you in community facilities. There might be something for you in wastewater management. I would just direct you to the website to look at those particular programs and see what you have. Primarily, I work with REAP and the business and industry program. In terms of agricultural producers, you're a producer on crops, livestock, and this is a growing industry, aquaculture. Also looking at forestry operations, nurseries, or dairies as well too. You have to receive 50% or more of your gross income from that. You might have combined operations. It's just 50% of your profits, gross income rather, 50% of your gross income, not profits, have to come from agricultural operations. The other thing about the USDA is we have a government website that can help you determine if you are in fact rural. You might look at your particular location and you might know down to your heart and soul that you're rural, and you can get on this and you'll probably be proven correct. One of the things that I would really insist that you do is if you say, well, I've got this business, it's located just outside of Houston. In fact, it's located in Galveston, Texas, and it's on the beach, and I don't think it's rural. Guess what? It is. If you were to put Galveston, Texas along the beachfront into the search engine, what you're going to find out is that according to the USDA Rural Development Program, you are rural and you are eligible for our programs. So be careful about the assumptions that you make. Always run them through, always run the checks, because you might be eligible. You don't know. The projects that are eligible under REAP, some of them are obvious. Some of them, I think, were a little surprising to me, at least when I read about them. Solar, we all know solar is a big thing here in Texas. We all know wind is a big thing in Texas. One of the things that was a bit of a surprise to me is if you have a small hydroelectric facility in your rural community and it's below 30 megawatts, it's eligible for this too. It was 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was working on the close of an anaerobic digester. So if you own a cattle yard or a dairy, that's the one I was working on, and you're looking for assistance and you are looking at digesters, we are very interested in those. And we have experience with those as well too here in Texas. One of the things we have less experience with, but we still have availability for, is biomass and geothermal. I just mentioned Galveston. Wave and ocean power is also eligible as well too. Haven't got an application for that, but would be just happy to see one. In terms of energy efficiency, again, here's what we have. Lighting. If you have a building that has some of the old lighting, fluorescent lamps and whatnot, and you want to replace them, and you can prove out that you're going to get some efficiency savings, lighting is available. Heating and cooling, we all know what a big difference, say, an updated cooling system can make at this time of year in Texas. You still have to prove it out on paper, but I think a lot of us can understand these two HVAC categories, if you will. Heating, cooling, and ventilation. Fans can make a big difference as well too. That does have to be pulled out. Automated controls and insulation. Again, these things have to be proven out that there's going to be sufficient cost savings, but those things are eligible for grants and they're eligible for loans as well too. Just wanted to point out environmental. Everybody always has questions about environmental and government programs. If you're over 10 acres, probably going to need some more detailed environmental renewal review. If you're under, we may not, but again, don't assume anything. Get it checked out for sure. EEI, what I was just talking about, we need an assessment, we need an audit to make sure there's going to be a savings, if you will, that energy is going to be saved and it's going to be more efficient. The RES program on loan guarantees, it has to follow some of the regulations that guide the business and industry program. Therefore, it might need a feasibility study. This came up last week, want to really draw attention to the bottom part of this slide and do not begin construction or incur costs prior to agency confirmation. In other words, I know you're ready to go. I know you're ready to get moving here, but make sure everything is lined up between yourself and the USDA if it's a grant, or between yourself, your banker, and the USDA if it's a grant and one of our guaranteed loan programs as well too. The funding that is available. So on renewable energy systems, the minimum that we will entertain is $10,000. The maximum grant request that we'll entertain is up to $1 million. On energy efficiency, it's $6,000, and the maximum grant request is $500,000. There's still, that can be also bracketed, if you will, by the fact that the grant can only be for up to 50% of the overall project costs. Just to go ahead and address this question right here, right now, that's for the entire project. If PACE comes in with something else, that gets added. As long as the grant doesn't total 50%, we're fine. Again, we do have to follow some of the regulations that guide the business and industry program. That program basically states that if you look at a loan, if you will, only 75% of the cost can be covered by the loan and the grant. Long story short, you got to have 25% equity in this project at a bare minimum if you're looking at a loan and a grant combo. Here's some information on what you have to do to qualify for this. For example, if you're looking at, okay, I want to put in solar panels, that would fall under one of the criterias here. We have not gotten anything here in Texas that I'm aware of where we had an energy community, but I'm sure that's going to change at some point. Energy efficiency improvement, we've kind of gone over that. This is another thing that if you had questions, I would recommend that you talk to somebody, either your banker or to the state director for REAP here, whose name and contact information we'll see at the end of this particular presentation that I make. Eligible costs are, kind of intuitive. The equipment, we want to see, if we're doing a solar field or something along those lines, these are monies that we want to see go toward the solar panels, if you will, the purchase and the installation. We understand there's going to be some professional fees to get these things done. We understand permits and licenses. We understand some soft costs for sure. However, on the grant, we can't give you grant monies for working capital. If you need working capital as a part of your business, that has to be done on a loan, if you will. Ineligible things, none of this is residential. In terms of equipment, it's really got to be equipment that's directed towards energy efficiency or the energy generation that you might be doing. You can see some of these other things, pre-application construction and facility improvements also aren't eligible. I'll just go ahead and add something to this list that I don't see. Broker fees are also ineligible as well too. Also, a direct payment from the grant to the business owner, beneficiary, or a relative would be ineligible as well. Going to go over some examples here. Want to draw your attention back to the fact of if you apply for a $20,000 grant, you sort of go into a pool that's a set aside, if you will. As a result, the people who put these slides together, you'll see that come up here again and again and again. Also, hopefully this will give you some examples of what the program is, what it's intended to do, how the loans and the grants can work together as well. So the first one here, solar array. We're really big on solar here in Texas. We get a lot of sun here. As you can see, that REAP grant is coming in at $20,000 toward the total project cost, and the applicant contribution is $128,000. What that is basically going to show you right here is that the REAP grant falls under that 50%. We are going to ask for proof that the solar panels are going to carry their weight, and they're going to be there's going to be a decrease in your energy costs, if you will. And what we're looking at there, 40% is a big number. Might not be 40%, might be a little bit less than that. If you hit 30%, that's good to go. If you are an electric cooperative, again, same deal, 20,000 REAP grant, that's a set aside. And again, we can see that the REAP grant, it falls under 50%. The applicant comes in for the rest on here, and we get a solar field with some production, if you will. This one was real. If you have an auto shop that has a rural location, if you will, and they have a hydropower deal set up. Again, the REAP grant came in under $20,000. The applicant contribution basically was enough to make the REAP grant fall under that 50% deal, and it generated less than the, I believe, 30 or 20. I'm sorry, I forget. It was on the slide earlier that I read out. But anyway, 11 is under what the capacity was for the energy generation. So they got a significant reduction in energy costs to the business. And this is a further example. This is going to be harder to come by in Texas, but not impossible for that matter. Geothermal, if you will. Typically, geothermal costs a little bit more. This is an example where, okay, you know, I understand the $20,000 thing, but I've got almost a $200,000 project here, and I would like to apply for a little bit more than $20,000 on the grant side. Here's an example of how that could work. The $148,950 commercial loan, that could be covered under this particular system. That commercial loan would have to come through your banker. Your banker would then have to approach us if the guarantee was to cover that $148,950. Again, at the end, you got to show a reduction in energy costs as well, too. Here's something we have quite a few of in Texas, and that's a poultry farm. Again, $20,000 on the REAP grant, that hits that set aside, if you will. Commercial loan comes in for another piece of it. That commercial loan may or may not be covered by the guarantee in this program. That's for you and your banker to figure out. We got an improvement on savings in electricity. And of course, this would come under energy efficiency improvement, as a lot of energy is used in the raising of chickens, if you will. So here's something that we see quite a bit of in Texas, and that's poultry farming. Now, this shows something that, you know, you might have a business out in a rural area that doesn't really have a direct tie to the rural environment other than the fact that it's there. They're not an ag, they're not a farmer, they're not an agricultural processor, but they provide a good or a service to that particular community that is needed. So they would qualify for the REAP grant as well, too. In this case, perhaps the washers and the dryers were done with dealer financing, and no guarantee was required in that particular case. This is another way this could be structured to kind of make these deals happen, if you will. A nursery, these are actually very popular in Texas. In this case, a lot of things had to be done to the nursery to try to retrain the heat, fans, vents, computerized controls, kind of bring it into the next century, if you will. We have done some of these things, some of these projects before on the B&I side, if you will, even before REAP. But in this case, there are some monies set aside in REAP for energy efficiency improvement. That includes grant monies, as you can see here. In this case, you could also, the banker might look at it and might say, okay, we're going to go get a loan guarantee on a portion of this loan, which would be $100,000, or maybe the banker wants it on the whole thing, and he wants $115,891, that commercial loan that you see. That could be guaranteed, that could be non-guaranteed, whatever is needed to make the deal work, if you will. So long story short, there's a REAP grant here that's combined with other things. We're of course going to hear after me, we're going to hear about PACE as well too, and that can fit into this as well. When I was really getting my start as an underwriter, one of the things that I did a lot of convenience stores, and I did a couple of grocery stores as well too. And I'm aware that a lot of the money that you spend when you're starting these things up is the cooler, and how vital the cooler is to the profitability of either the convenience store or the grocery store. We also know the older models burn a lot of energy. So there could be some energy efficiency in updating them and improving. That would be another use of this particular program. In this case, maybe there's an electric co-op out there that comes in with a rebate for this as well too. Grocery stores and convenience stores are something I have familiar with, and rural development has familiarity with as well too. You just don't see as many assembly manufacturers out there, but they still exist. There are, some people that exist out in the rural environment that are building things possibly under a defense contract here in the state of Texas. I know in my banking background, I worked at the SBA for an assembler, actually, who had a defense contract. So I'm familiar with these sorts of businesses. In this case, again, we see a REAP grant coming in under $20,000 for the set-aside. Applicant comes in with some more and basically improves lighting. I had a small career doing some soldering myself as well too. I know the importance of lighting when you're doing that. Again, flower in a gift shop, that's another energy intensive business. Heating and cooling, very important there as well too. In this case, what you're looking at is a REAP grant that came in at $8,627 and a guaranteed loan at $17,200, with the applicant contribution coming in as well too, to build the equity up to where we needed it. Proved out some energy saving, and there you go. You can use this program for HVAC and insulation upgrades for a business that, again, might not be directly involved with farming or with processing farming goods, but might provide goods and services out in a rural community. Guaranteed loan funding. This is one of the things I do in the BNI program. Again, the minimum that you can request for the guaranteed loans is $5,000. The maximum is $25 million. Usually what we run into is, sometimes we do get requests for $30 million. The maximum request is $25 million in this particular deal. Some additional information. It is subject to the OneRD Guaranteed Loan Program guidelines. Those really follow the business and industry guidelines, if you will. One of which is the second line item here, that you cannot exceed 75% of eligible project costs. Long story short, you've got to have 25% of your own equity in a combination of the project when you're talking about a guaranteed loan, 25%. One of the things that I would like to add to that, the two things that we really talk about on guaranteed loans, yes, 25% capital from the business owner has to be there as well too. The debt service coverage, I know that sounds like a long, complicated term, but all that means is that your business has to make the loan payment of at least 1.1 times to be eligible as well too. And you have to talk to your banker before you apply to this program, because actually the banker applies on your behalf, and they can certainly explain more of that to you. Again, you have to talk to your banker to negotiate what the interest rate is going to be, what the terms are going to be, what the conditions of the loans are going to be, and sort of put the package together between you and your banker. There are going to be some collateral requirements as well too. In general, it at least has to be one-to-one collateral. If we have, say, a $100,000 project, we are going to be looking for $100,000 or more of collateral. Energy efficiency, the funding that's available. this is just telling you that in 2018, we passed some money for these programs. We have since passed more money, and we have taken the requirements of the grant up to 50%. It used to be 25%. You might have heard 25% in the past. It's now 50 on energy efficiency systems. In terms of energy and efficient equipment systems too, if you're combining a loan, that again has to hit the 25% requirement for capital. This is how to apply for these particular things, or how to get more information. One of the things I noticed as I was going over this is that this link to the state energy coordinator doesn't work. Rather than be computer proficient enough to fix the link before this particular presentation, I just put a slide in at the end of this. So you'll have to do it old school and look at the side and possibly even dial the phone. These two links, however, work. The application packages can be found on the WEAP website on the how to apply. I personally like to go in there and just get an overview of what it is the application is looking for. The applications have to be, it says mailed or emailed to rural development staff. Let me give you a hint. If you want your application to be evaluated a lot faster with a lot more efficiency, go through grants.gov. As promised, the State Energy Coordinator for REAP is Vicki Pendleton. Please tell her Mark Patterson said to call and talk to you about REAP. She will just be pleased to talk to you. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mark. If you'll stop sharing your screens, I want to take a minute and highlight some of the questions that have come in during your presentation. I do look forward to talking for a few minutes about PACE, but while this is fresh in everybody's mind, do you mind taking a few questions here?
Absolutely. If I don't know the answer to your question, I'm going to write it down and get back to you.
Okay. So you mentioned a set aside for grants under 20K. A couple of your examples were much higher than that. I think you originally said that there was the grant cap was 500,000. Was that correct?
That's correct.
So if someone can really use more than 20,000, do they increase their chances of getting a REAP grant if they stay within the pool of set aside for under 20K?
The fact of the matter is, yes. A set aside is going to be dealt with first, if you will. We know that in a lot of situations, let's face it, energy efficiency or just energy generation is an expensive proposition. It's an expensive project. We know and understand that. So really the answer is no when you get right down to it. I'm not trying to say, hey, don't send me applications that are above $20,000. Please don't interpret it that way. And please don't look at it that way. As an underwriter, that's where I got my start. Let the project drive that and let the financials drive.
Got it. Okay. If by some unusual circumstance you don't use the whole allotment for a quarter for REAP grants, does it go into the next quarter or does it disappear?
That would be a question I'll have to write down and get back to you with.
Okay. Can a health clinic or a hospital qualify as a rural business?
That's another one I'll have to. So in terms of REAP, I will have to get back to you on the hospital or the health clinic.
Okay. I would assume if they're for profit, they do, right? If they're not government owned and they're not a nonprofit. Okay. Because I could think of three different ways they can.
Whole assumption. In general, REAP is not for nonprofits.
Got it. But if it's a for-profit clinic that is not owned by the local government, if it's technically a business, it probably could.
That's correct. I will double check that.
Perfect.
Again, got my start in underwriting, so I'm going to have to double check it and get back to you.
Okay, so the effectiveness of these investments need to be proven. In PACE, the statute actually requires an independent third-party validation that the savings are real. And I'm guessing if somebody wanted to use both a PACE program and a USDA program, that could be coordinated, so you don't have to do it twice. But do you have standards that you require for that review, that proven calculation of what the savings are projected to be?
We do. Third party is certainly one of the standards. In terms of the standards, after that, I would have to get back to you.
Okay. So another question is, how do you define residential? In the Texas PACE statute, residential is considered a property with 4 or fewer units. So an apartment complex with 5 apartments is eligible for PACE. Do you know what the definition is that you use for what's residential and what's commercial or multifamily?
We cannot do residential or any other number for that matter in this particular program.
So you cannot get a REAP grant for an apartment complex?
No apartments.
Okay. There are some apartments in Michigan that have received loan guarantees. Do we know what USDA programs those are?
So rural development does have something separate from this, does have a housing division, if you will. That's completely separate from this.
Okay. So
it doesn't.
That research is outside this webinar today.
Yes. The answer is no. We don't do housing. We don't do residential. We don't do apartments.
Okay. Here's a question. Can your loans be a second mortgage or a mezzanine loan, or do they have to be first lien?
We do have to be first lien because we have to have that one-to-one collateral.
Got it. Okay. Here's a question from the Panhandle. For manufactured wind turbines that qualify for the ITC federal tax credits, do the same standards apply for USDA grants as to what counts as sufficiently manufactured and therefore qualify for USDA? So I'm just reading it. That one I didn't understand.
Yeah, I would need a little more clarification on the question. Are you asking, does the wind turbine need to be made in the USA?
Kurt, if you want to type a little more information in here, we might be able to answer your question. Otherwise, we'll get back to you. Here's the final question that I'm seeing. Does a food processing facility, such as cheese manufacturer, qualify as ag production? How about a dog food manufacturer? The list of what qualifies in this presentation was short, and so he's asking for a little bit more information.
Cheese would. Dog food I would have to look into.
Okay. Yeah, the example I learned about last week was like hot sauce, right? Or salsa. Anyway, that pecans, let me ask about pecans. I'm going to El Paso next week. Can a pecan processing qualify?
Pecan processing, I believe, does qualify, actually. Okay. My grandfather grew up on a pecan farm.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. We're going to hold off on the other questions until after I get a chance to share a little bit about PACE, and then we'll have some Q&A time left at the end. I'm really excited about this information. I know of so many potential PACE projects that are also great fits for the USDA REAP program. So I am very excited about that. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen now and share a little bit about the PACE program. So PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy, and the Texas PACE Act is 10 years old this year. So I am very excited to show you that in that last 10 years, we are it's working. We have proven the concept, and we committed as a nonprofit. Texas Pace Authority is committed to bring this to all of Texas, which is why it's so exciting to be working with USDA. So every business would like to make more money. And the two ways that you do that is you sell more stuff or you reduce your operating costs, or hopefully both. So the idea behind PACE and behind REAP and the other programs we're hearing about today is how do you as a business lower your operating costs so you can increase your net operating income. And when you lower your operating costs by reducing your energy and also with PACE, you can also reduce your water savings. You're freeing up natural resources that are important to your community and to the growth. So property assessed clean energy is available to commercial properties, including nonprofits, multifamily properties with at least 5 units, and industrial properties, and that includes agriculture. As an example of what happens when a developer has access to affordable long-term fixed rate financing for energy and water saving investments is that empty buildings, and they're everywhere in Texas. We have these beautiful historic downtown buildings that sit empty because nobody can figure out how to overcome the costs of bringing them back to life. Amarillo created a PACE program for this Barfield building. The developer used $7.3 million in PACE. It only can be used for energy efficiency, water savings, and creating power on site. In that investment, along with other sources of capital, this beautiful building is now operating as a Marriott Autograph Hotel, a beautiful place that has changed the dynamics of the blocks around it, as well as people have come to stay here. It's also created 55 permanent hotel jobs in downtown Amarillo. So when under a conventional situation, the cost of replacing HVAC, replacing a roof is very expensive, but these are equipment loans. So it's not like the bank can come and take the roof back or the HVAC back if you don't pay. So to reduce their risk, because the collateral is so challenging, they want to be paid back in 5 years or less, or to renegotiate an interest rate every 5 years. So there are big payments due before you get to the utility savings or the repair savings. I call that the tower of pain, because you have a big cash flow problem before you get to the savings that can help the business. But are you going to have to lay somebody off? What doesn't get done? Do you not add a new line to your manufacturing? Something is going to suffer when you have to take money out of your core business to make these repairs or improvements. And as a result, buildings don't get built with quality materials, or buildings that need these upgrades suffer from deferred maintenance. All PACE does is knock that tower over. It is not funding that comes from the local government. It comes from the lender of the owner's choice. But instead of paying a few very big payments, the owner agrees to pay a longer series of small payments, accessing the utility savings and other savings that can make those installment payments. These are designed to be cash flow positive, and these improvements literally pay for themselves using PACE. So the local government creates the program. Because we're not using taxpayer dollars and we're not creating a local bureaucracy, Texas PACE Authority was created to operate these programs in a transparent public servant manner. And the division between what's a government role and what's a private sector role is something that we take very seriously, because we want the property owners to have all the power to work with the people that they choose to do business in the way that they want to do it. So the property owner can pick the highest and best use of this program and figure out how they want to fund these improvements with other options, including USDA incentives. Texas PACE Authority was created in 2015, and in this short amount of time, we've grown to serve 91 local governments almost every one of them has a rural component that makes it a perfect fit for the programs you've already heard about today. The program has also proven itself. So we have recently crossed the line over 400 million in new energy and water saving investment in Texas that might not have otherwise occurred without the ability to access this long-term fixed rate affordable financing program. It is completely voluntary. And we've now been able to serve every sector of the economy. The largest project is 40 million. The smallest project is 70,000. And they are across Texas. And we are making a big difference in making sure that we're saving energy and power and water. This applies to all forms of energy. And it applies, again, as we enter into another drought. We're very happy that the PACE water component can be an add-on to USDA, but in the energy field, they complement each other perfectly as well. So a lot of what we're seeing are older buildings in towns across Texas that are being repurposed. In these three examples, they are all being repurposed to badly needed multifamily properties. And that one on the right in Temple is potentially eligible for another USDA program that covers multifamily. But many of the cities and communities we serve, or the unincorporated areas of the counties we serve, can take advantage of both programs. Mark mentioned Galveston along the water. This is the old Falstaff Brewery that is becoming a PACE project, and it's becoming a hotel. And it's within walking distance of where the ships dock. So once it goes live, it'll be a wonderful addition to the Galveston Island economy. We have a nonprofit in Castroville in Medina County that bought 5 underutilized or vacant downtown properties. They have worked out a deal with one PACE lender. They've completed 3 of those projects already, but imagine what this can do to a small town when buildings are brought back to life and find a higher and best use. Last year, we closed our first PACE medical facilities, one in Tyler and one in Beaumont. And again, these are desperately needed facilities. We are working on one now, a clinic in a very rural area of Texas. And that project also has a USDA loan guarantee. So hopefully we'll be able to talk about that one soon. But being able to support healthcare facilities in rural areas is just a critical need now. So we're excited to be able to prove the concept. And I really want to highlight this. This is our first REAP and PACE project in Texas. This is a feed store in Elgin, Texas. This was also the first local bank funded PACE project. So this was a $200,000 solar project, and a great contractor went out and applied for USDA REAP grant and for Encore utility incentives, and dramatically reduced the cost of the project for the owner. And we're very excited about this proof of concept in rural Texas. And people might say, well, Elgin is just right outside of Austin. That is true in Bastrop County, and it is still considered rural by population under the USDA rules. And then also we are supporting, facilitating a private lender who is helping the owner rebuild an old dude ranch into a lovely resort in Fort Davis, in Jeff Davis County in West Texas. Again, proving the concept that PACE works everywhere in Texas. And then finally, this was the first opportunity for us to learn that we could also create permanent places for permanent employment when we bring these old vacant facilities back to life. This is an old Hager sewing plant in Corsicana, which is now being used to produce sporting clothing. So a very exciting opportunity there. We follow a program designed by Texans for Texans. 130 people spent a year in 5 different working groups to create a program that would be trusted, that would have a high bar of underwriting, technical, and administrative quality requirements. And all 91 local governments that we serve follow that. The statute lays out a process for local governments to create this program. And I hope if you're working on behalf of a local government and you're interested in creating this economic opportunity that is no cost to the local government, that you'll look us up. Everybody benefits from this program. And again, there are no taxpayer dollars used. Lots of resources. We are going to share these slides with everyone. And we are, Mark has shared some one-pagers that we'll share as well. And all of you will get the slides, a copy of the webinar, and these extra materials in a follow-up email. I'm going to jump to the questions here, and I'm being asked, the loan to value limit is a criteria for the Texas PACE applications. The answer is yes. It's 25% of the value of the property as complete. So whatever the appraisal says the property is going to be worth when you set the hammers down, the PACE loan can be 25% of that. Okay, so we've got remanufactured turbines used, in other words, have to meet the standards to qualify for the ITC tax credit. So this is the follow-up on the question we needed more information on. Do the same standards apply to qualify for USDA grants? In other words, do you have to meet the tax credits? The ITC tax credits have certain requirements. Are those the same requirements for the USDA programs?
As I understand it, the tax credits are different. They have a whole different set of standards. Generally, too, tax credits are they require a high project size to sort of justify their existence in terms of the fees that you pay to get a tax credit program going. So you've got to be talking about something fairly big to make it work.
Great. Mr. Ziebler, thank you for the compliment. We appreciate it. I have a couple questions for you just to clarify a couple things in my mind. You had said something about you need to pull out the EE. I think you meant energy efficiency. When you're looking at a renewable project, you mentioned pulling out EE first. Does that make sense to you? I'm not sure. I just wrote myself a note at the time because I didn't understand what you meant by that.
Well, in terms of energy efficiency projects, there's just benchmarks that they have to meet to prove that they, again, produce the efficiency that's advertised, if you will, in utility bills, and conserve energy, basically, at the long run.
Okay, there are some other programs that I've read about, and this is kind of what I was trying to get at, that before you can get funding for renewable projects like adding solar, you need to address some of the energy efficiency concerns, because you can make power with solar, but if you're wasting the power you're creating by running an air conditioning system that's cooling the sidewalks because there's no insulation, it's kind of a waste. So I was wondering if you were saying you want to see some energy efficiency before you put solar on that property. Is that a requirement?
The standards are fairly open, if you will, and there are audits that you have to go through depending on size level. We understand that, let's say your project size is $15,000, for example. We're not going to charge out and make you prove every last thing, but it does sort of have to pass the common sense test, if you will, at low levels.
Got it. Okay.
Now, higher levels, yes, you're going to have an audit, and you're going to have to prove that you're making some savings. Okay.
Well, I'm going to connect you with some folks in the geothermal world, because there seems to be a lot of buzz in Texas lately about geothermal. So not that I have any expertise to share here, but but there's a lot happening. So I'll connect you to that effort. My last question is, you had a slide that had an acronym RES, all caps. And I did a double take because I thought, okay, that does not mean residential. Do you recall that slide? I'm just curious about what you meant by RES.
It absolutely does not mean residential. I'd have to look at that.
Okay. I am not seeing any other questions, and we were right at the top of the hour. Mark, I am so grateful for your time and attention today. This was an awesome amount of information, and I really appreciate your ability to explain it in English. Or maybe that's not the right thing to say, because we're not all English speakers as native English speakers. But okay, let me take my shoe out of my mouth. You made it understandable, and I am very grateful for that. So thank you very much, and thank you for everyone for attending today. We will follow up with an email with all the information.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.